Welcome to all of you who are joining us. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Thanks for joining. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be starting in just a few minutes. Appreciate you being here. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Hello, thank you all. Welcome for being here, and we will get started in just a moment. All right. Hello. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jen Cooper. I go by Coop. I'm a leader here in our marketing team at League Apps, and I'm happy to welcome you to our webinar today, co-sponsored with Anchored. And I'm very happy to chat with you guys about safety and risk mitigation in youth sports. A couple bits of housekeeping here before we get started. You can submit questions at any time during this webinar by clicking the Q&A button below. We will be sending out the recording to you afterwards. And please note that quickly we've put up a poll here to grab some insights from you. Keep your eyes open for another poll at the end, and we look forward to feedback. Your feedback helps us a lot. Thank you so much. Without further ado, I would like to pass it off to none other than Seth Lieberman at Anchored, and he will introduce himself and the rest of our panelists.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm the CEO over here at Anchored and have an awesome, actually, set of content for people today. We've got Mark Yoswitz, who is all things league apps, but specializes in this area around risk, around privacy, around a lot of the stuff that people don't like to think about, but need to think about when running organizations. And Margaret Reed over at Nassau County Police Athletic League, who's a joint customer of both of ours and is in all the nitty gritty of this every day. She's going to give us a bunch of stories, hopefully good stories, not war stories, but about how she brings this to life, what she looks for, things she thinks about, things she's concerned about. I think, like Ku mentioned, it's great if you have a question as we go through this. This is meant to be somewhat interactive. Throw it in. We'll grab it when we can, and we'll talk about it as we go through. So, welcome, and hope you guys get value out of this. I think the first area to start, if we want to move on the slides, is thinking about how do you manage your risk. And some of the stuff we're going to talk about, and Mark's going to start for us, but really thinking about what do I need to worry about? How do I approach it? Like, what are the concerns and why does it matter? And I think the best area to really start is thinking about risk and like why do I worry about it? What's the importance of it? And what can I actually mitigate? So if we want to jump to the management risk, we can go one more. And really, I think this is a great place for you to start, Mark, which is nobody can really be risk free, right? Like I don't think that's always the goal, but like how what is the right level? How do I think about this as an entity?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Being risk-free means there's no exposure to risk at all. It implies absolute safety and certainty, and no possibility of loss or harm. And actually, it's basically impossible in real life. So you can't be risk-free, but that's not actually even the best place to be.
Right.
Taking risks, not taking risks leads to stagnation and lack of growth and missed opportunities. So on the other hand, reckless risks can result in major problems and setbacks. So the key to understanding this is the delicate balance between risk and reward. And risk mitigation basically involves reducing or managing risk rather than completely eliminating it. It's really the realization that some level of risk will always exist, but we seek to minimize it and its impact through strategies that we're going to talk about today: insurance, contingency planning, best practices, safety measures. So I think it's key to really understand that risk is an unavoidable part of both our personal and professional lives. And the more that we do to sort of look out and try to mitigate those risks, the better position we'll be both in our personal lives and our professional lives.
Yeah, I think that's well said. The beauty of it is that a bunch of the risk is known, right? And we're going to go dig into this stuff. And so, where you worry about risk, I think, Mark, is like when you don't know what's going to happen or you don't know where there is exposure or risk or problems. But in youth sports, there's a pretty well trod path here. And there's a bunch of stuff we can look at where you'd say, okay, you have risk here. Here's how you mitigate it. You're going to have risk here. Here's how you mitigate it. And I think you're right. Having a plan is the most important thing because that's probably what keeps people up at night is just not knowing like where do I have risk or where do I have exposure.
Yeah, I agree. Having a plan and also look, consulting experts in the field. In your personal life, you manage risks, health risks by going to doctors. You manage financial risks by going to financial advisors, experts in the field who can analyze your personal situation and make, realistic recommendations. In businesses, sometimes we get very narrowly focused and we think, we fall in love with our own baby, so to speak, our business, and think that, we can manage everything. And I think often we overlook the experts in the field who do this every day from a business standpoint and need to sort of avail ourselves of these folks, to help and guide us in the context of our own, business itself.
Yeah. So good segue. Let's get down to brass tacks right away, right? Because it's a Thursday and we don't have time to mess around here. So, um, some consideration, some stuff we've pulled together, and let's go through these one by one. But where is their exposure? Insurance is huge. I'm sure everybody on this call has thought about their insurance, their certificate of insurance. What are the covenants in my insurance? Um, and I think that's something that we'll spend a little bit of time about and think about and is important as well as other stuff you may not spend as much time thinking about, right? So where, you know, if you have some really bad incidents, you can damage your reputation, you can damage your program. You might not even have a program anymore if the wrong things happen, right? And of course, ultimately, it's about protecting kids, right? Youth sports about protecting kids and keeping them safe and giving them the chance to grow and learn and all that stuff. So, um, Mark, when you think about these, walk us through some of this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, increased liability exposure. If you're not taking steps, if you don't have the right policies and procedures in place, look, I truly believe that employees, for example, are both your greatest asset and your greatest liability. Greatest asset in that it's hard to find really good people and to trust those people and to give them leadership, positions. But also, things go wrong. People make mistakes. Sometimes people, do things intentionally. And so, therefore, um, understanding your people, understanding your staff, and making sure that you're actively communicating your policies and your procedures effectively, I think goes a long way towards mitigating that exposure. Um, Insurance premiums, I don't think I've ever seen an insurance premium go down in the history. But managing year over year premium insurance increases is really a reflection of them, their perception of how risky you are as a business. So if you don't have a lot of claims, if you're if you're following these procedures, if you've written them down, if you've meaning if you've published them publicly so that people can understand and consent to them, goes a long way towards mitigating increased insurance. Lawsuits and settlements, of course, we live in a litigious world today. One of our partners, and I won't name who, actually was being sued in small claims court for lack of playing time for their child, which is, I've been here for 6 years, and that's a new one for me. So, people will dream up ways to, both valid and sometimes ridiculous ways to go after what they perceive to be targets, and so therefore, have to make sure that we mitigate against those. And then, as you said, ultimately, it's about protecting the business and protecting the children that are part of your program.
Yeah, I think it's interesting around insurance because we have a lot of insurance partners who, we talk to and we help sort of meet in the middle and think about it. And what they're really most worried about today, and if you talk to your insurance broker or your insurance provider, they'll tell you this, they're most worried about molestation claims. It's the most expensive clause and coverage you can get. Like, yes, they're worried about kids getting concussions and broken arms, but that doesn't result in multi-million-dollar lawsuits. Molestation does. And so anything you can do to protect, prevent, train against grooming and predators and all the terrible things, we don't have to go into all the details, but that's where a lot of risk lies and a lot of premium lies in your insurance. And so we've talked to a lot of folks who are looking at how they can help customers not only do a better job, but potentially actually even lower their premium, give them a credit back if they're meeting really high compliance levels, because they know, again, right? How does insurance work? You collect a premium and then you don't have a claim. That's the business model, right? And so they know if they can help prevent claims and protect kids, it's a better business model for them, and they're actually you're a better risk. And so you're not I say that because you're not in this alone. Obviously folks on this call can be resources, but your insurance broker is also a great resource. They might have content, policies, procedures, strategies for you to help think about that. It doesn't mean if you don't get a lawsuit, you might not spend some money, but that's the difference between the sort of nuclear lawsuit and a settlement, and like saying, hey, hang on a minute, and Margaret will, you can jump in if you got anything germane to this, but like, we did this, we have a track record, we have a history, we have an audit log. And so, then you have a defense. Of course, it doesn't necessarily always protect you, but that's the goal here, right? That's how you mitigate the risk, not prevent the risk when we think about that.
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, I think that's a good point, Seth. Ultimately, um, you're judged by, or were judged by the steps that we took place in order to help mitigate that risk and whether they were reasonable or not, given the context and the circumstances. And so, um, you know, there's a lot of reasonable person standards that exist in evaluating whether you took the steps. I think everyone understands that things happen. And no matter what you do to prepare, there will be things that go wrong. But really, ultimately, we're judged on what are the steps that we took in order to mitigate those risks, in order to communicate those risks effectively to the people that are participating in our programs. Because there's also a concept, that you understood the risk and you participate in the risk, and that's why we have things like waivers and agreements and policies and procedures. Um, there's a caveat emptor, which is, fancy word for, for understanding that things happen and that you've assumed this risk as well. And so publicizing it, making sure that people understand it, in many cases, having them sign things that acknowledge their understanding and receipt of the exposure and the risk, also goes a long way to help mitigate the ultimate circumstances of whether you'll be judged to have been negligent or reasonable.
Yeah. And one of the key things, we're going to mention this a couple times because it's really important. One of the key things to that is you have to follow the policy and procedures that you lay out, right? That is an absolute, will blow a hole in the side of your ship. If you knew you had a policy, you were going to do these things, you were going to do these trainings, you were going to background check these people, and you only did it for half your people, or you only did it when you felt like it, or you let Joe on the field because you know Joe and he's a good coach and whatever. That blows apart your defense because you should have done it. You told people you were going to do it and you didn't do it consistently. And that's the death knell to all the things you've laid apart, laid in place to protect and follow stuff. So I'm going to sort of keep saying it, and I know Mark will layer it in too. But if you have a policy, you got to follow it. That's the key to the defense of it and the efficacy of it. And so there's a couple. We don't want to scare people, but on the next slide there's a bunch of bad stories, and you probably heard them, but like kids a swimmer who had a cardiac arrest in a pool, and lifeguards weren't trained, weren't on duty, didn't know CPR, no AED. Like this is sort of a worst case scenario, but AEDs are also becoming a huge thing for folks, right? Like there's new California law for anybody in California coming on board. I'm sure you know about it. Got to have AEDs in place at fields, practice fields, and training. I think that will continue over the coming years throughout other states. But ultimately, having an AED and not having it charged or having people trained is a travesty, and it doesn't have to be that way. But again, it takes some effort, right? This stuff doesn't happen overnight by itself. And so these are the sort of goals to prevent this happening to anybody on the call or anybody we know, to have, the sort of nuclear lawsuits. Okay, so let's talk about strategies and sort of a 360-degree approach. So Mark or Margaret, Margaret's got some data and some other information she's going to share up ahead. But Margaret, let me call on you and suck you into this conversation, because Nassau County is 1.3 million people. You've got tens of thousands of kids, thousands of coaches. You're managing a really complex organization here with a lot of moving parts, and a lot of headaches probably. So maybe I'm going to pull you in earlier, but tell me about standardization of some of the stuff you've done and why that's been important, and how you're using that to train and start to lay the groundwork for safety.
Yeah. So number one, thank you for having me. I'm excited and sharing all the things that I live through every single day. Everything that you said, Seth and Mark, it's 100% true. We're a volunteer program. We have 30 units within Nassau County. We have about 30,000 participants, and all these risk management, these risk, mitigations. I'm living it every single moment of the day. So this is really, really important for anybody who is in youth sports. Because we do have police officer directors, and we are kind of connected to Nassau County PD, but not really. We're still a nonprofit, but there's a misunderstanding that we're part of the county that makes us, like you said, Seth, we're a big target. They think that we have county money, which we don't. We're a nonprofit. We rely on donations from communities. So, risk management is very important to us. Funny enough that I actually came back from Connecticut meeting with our insurance company just Tuesday. And, going over policies, the coverages, the abuse prevention, the concussion, the, aggregates and stuff like that. It is really important that people understand and that they have enough coverage for their organization, whether you're a nonprofit or you're a corporate entity. What else did you want to?
Oh, that's great. Let's spend 1 minute on insurance, because I think people's insurance is a little bit of a black hole for them, right? They know they need it. but they don't actually know always what's in there. They don't know what the exclusions are. So maybe because you just did this, I'm going to go off script. Sorry. But like, talk to us about how you asked questions to your insurance company to understand about your risk. Like what should other people who are listening, what should they say so they understand what they need to do or where they have risk?
Okay, so number one, when we first started this at Nassau County PAL, it was just a background check and with an option to pass the abuse prevention. In our old system, we actually did not have a safeguard as far as making sure every single volunteer had completed that certification. So that gave us a very big risk. I don't think people really realize how big it was. So it just so happened that, you know, we were going through new contracts with our registration platform. And funny enough, Seth, I don't know if I had mentioned this to you, but Anchored was actually on my list of companies to look for as far as our background checks. And the reason why I went with you guys, that you were on my list, was because you actually have a specialty in nonprofit organization. So that was that was a big plus.
Hmm.
That's number one. And then number two, funny enough, a day later after I was going to call your office, League Apps told us that they are starting a partnership with you. So I kind of felt like it was kind of like kismet. It was meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everything has been great. And I think one of the best parts of it was the automation, the integration between the League Apps and the Anchored. It really helped us, and we didn't realize how much it helped us, how much it saved us time by putting these rules and implementing these mandatory requirements as automated, being more automated. I mean, that really allowed me personally more time to focus on other things that were more important.
Yeah.
It's integrated into one system where I can actually pass some of those responsibilities to directors, where they can just log in, they could, you know, find what their status is. So that allowed me a little more time to focus on other things, meaning the insurance part. So I know that that was your original question. Um, yeah, sorry. So
That's right.
as far as the insurance is concerned, it's very important that people understand their coverages, their aggregates, making sure that they have the abuse and molestation coverage. And the other important thing for us, only because we deal with so many sports, that you have the concussion. So I have learned just recently that a lot of insurance companies no longer give concussion coverages. And if you do want it, you have to go through different tiers or even get a sub coverage through a secondary insurance company. So for anybody who's, you know, again, in the sports industry, it's really important that you understand what is being covered, what is not being covered, because basically the insurance companies will give you the base coverage. And it's your responsibility to make sure that you have enough coverage. So I think that is a very, very tricky part.
Yeah. Let's you opened up the stuff you guys are doing. Let's talk a little bit about that. Tell people what are the requirements you have of coaches. You know, walk them through the different things you're doing today, and why you're doing that. Like, let's tie it with the sort of risk, right? You mentioned concussion. You need to
Yeah,
have that in your insurance, but you also need to then get the training, right? Or maybe you don't get
correct.
coverage. So what are the things that Nassau County is doing for, you know, around safety and requirements and risk mitigation today?
Sure. So in Nassau County, PA, we actually have different tiers of volunteers, and each tier requires a different, you know, certification. So as an example, majority of our members are volunteer coaches. So from a coaching level, you would have to have a background check. You would need abuse prevention. You would need concussion, and also going back to what you said as far as state mandatory AEDs and CPR. Although we don't mandate it, we do require, or we ask that they pass a CPR class, and that way they can coach and they can be on the field. And the second tier would be like an admin. You could be a third party, a vendor. So at that point, you would, if you're working with kids, you would still have to follow those three requirements: background check, abuse prevention, and concussion. But if you're a third party vendor and you're just either renting space from us, maybe you're just somebody in with the team bringing your own kids in there, then we would just require background check. So we have like 3 or 4 different tiers going on right now in Anchored.
So, okay, so let's, I think we're gonna pop the slides. Bear with us for 1 second. No worries. Here, I think I can get them if that's helpful here. But let's talk about specific policies, because there's a lot of different policies and folks and things that that you might have. So let me just pull up. Bear with us 1 second, but oh, there we go. So if we look at slide 13, which is what to include in policies. So a lot of different things. There's background check policies, there's abuse prevention policies. Some of them also are trainings and checks. Some of them are simply communication. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of some of the key things around these policies, and also how it pertains to privacy policies and data security and safety, because it sort of all is combined together a little bit.
Yeah, in some sense, look, we're a software company, and so our job is to collect information on behalf of our folks and provide amazing software to make Margaret's job easier on a day-to-day basis. And so part of what we do and with our partners is we provide a system that allows you to include any number of these policies in the registration part of your program. And so we have policies that revolve around refunds and waivers and participation and as I said earlier, one of the most important aspects of communicating policies is to make sure that people have read them and understand them and there's a consent. And so therefore, as part of our registration procedures, each of our customers has the ability to define, list, and implement policies before a parent ever signs up for something, acknowledging, what needs to happen. And so, specifically for businesses, I'm not as familiar with all of these policies, which really apply to the youth sports organizations themselves. But with respect to the ones at the bottom, a privacy policy, terms of service, we talked a little bit about waivers and then refunds. These are increasingly important. They're important for us because we collect billions and billions of records of information. But the reality is that any organization that collects information from its participants through a website, through forms, needs to have a privacy policy. That's federal law and state laws as well. And so the privacy policy identifies the information that you collect, how you share it with other organizations, how you protect that information. And so we've noticed that increasingly organizations in youth sports are starting to understand that and to publish privacy policies, but they're very important. And you're vulnerable to plaintiffs' lawyers if you don't have that information on your site. Terms of service is really how people, what's your program about? What happens when you sign up? How are things enforced? And those also usually are published on the home site. Waivers, as we talked about in our registration flow, are included. And then refund policies. This has come up a lot, especially parents. I alluded to before, a child's not playing, a parent decides to quit, they dispute their payments, and all of a sudden it's a battle of whether you're collecting that information and what the refund policy is. By having an easy to read published refund policy linked to your site or in your terms of service or in your registration flow, it goes a long way towards saying, actually, no, we had tryouts, we have a team, you agreed to to be a part of this organization. You can't all of a sudden quit and dispute your participation or your registration fees. And so again, lots of different policies. It's not always the most fun thing to do, but sitting down and taking the time to identify what are the most important aspects of my organization, how do I detail them? How do I publish them? Will really help your business succeed.
Yeah. And I think the point here is you got to mitigate and manage risk on a multiple variables, multiple sort of axes here. So we've got player safety and player health risk. You've got federal law risk around am I doing background check screenings, which is the federal law. But then you also have other risk around refunds and terms of service and things like that. And so, not to be such a doomsday of a webinar on a Thursday, but like you got to think about these things. Margaret, when you look at this list and you think about putting not the stuff Mark talked about, the privacy policy, the terms of service stuff, but when you think about the actual nuts and bolts policies and procedures and um, codes of conducts and stuff that you're putting in place, what do you think are sort of most important on this list for people to start with? If I'm sure they already have a bunch of this, but like, how would you put the order of importance on this stuff as you think about it?
I would have to say background check and the screening policy, because I think that's the very top tier of risk. Um, I think most people do have their waivers. They have all of the all the other things that you have on your list now. A code of conduct, I think most people have that. That's just kind of like your number two thing as far as on your list. But I would have to say really it's the background check and screening, because that is, let's put it this way. Nassau County PAL, we're based on volunteers. Okay, these are volunteer parents, and there is no screening other than, if they, depending on what they do for work and stuff. Sometimes they get screened, sometimes they don't. We have some police officers, we have some firemen that they go through that process. But because we are volunteer, we're at a disadvantage because we need volunteers. We need to take whoever is willing to come in. But with that said, I don't know who's coming in, and it's really important that I can't stress enough that is our number one thing in everything that we do as an entity.
That's
Yeah.
the start. That's the starting point. There's a lot of stuff after that, but that's the first hurdle that we should make people. Actually, you were sharing a story with me last week, Margaret, when we were prepping for this about somebody who volunteered. You want to tell that story? And you sent him the stuff to do?
Oh, yeah. So actually, I have a couple of stories. So funny enough, when we go through this whole background check and risk and stuff, you would hope that everybody who's coming in is of good nature and honest and stuff like that. So we did actually have two instances. So number one, we had a volunteer. She said, "Yes, definitely, I'm willing to volunteer." She actually went through registration, and then she stopped at the first step of the background check. And I got an email like a day later, and she literally had said, "I started my background check and I realized that I have a schedule conflict and I can no longer volunteer." So, that kind of makes me wonder that, you started a background check, but what does that have to do with your schedule? You were willing to volunteer like a day ago because you had the time, but then when she went through some of the questions and started the background check, she changed her mind. So it kind of makes me wonder, what was going on. And because of that, it actually helped us filter people who, why wouldn't you want to fill out a background check?
Yeah. And that's a key, I think, point and a great story to illustrate, which is the right policies, the right procedures, the right actions will make it really hard for bad actors to participate, right? It's not that it's a perfect prevention, but like you make it really hard for people who shouldn't be there to be there. You make it really hard for people who might be trying to groom or be predators. Like it's uncomfortable. There's a spotlight on them. People know that they're supposed to look out for these behaviors, and that that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? It really helps mitigate a bunch of the potential people who shouldn't be there, and therefore decrease your risk, keeps you safer, right? All right, what's story number two? You said you
The
had two.
number two actually involves it involves a minor. So we have a volunteer who got flagged in one of the background checks. And the reason why he got flagged was because he had a record on threatening a minor. So the further we dug into it, we actually had one of the police officers speak to the volunteer coach, and it winds up that yes, he did, but there's a legit reason why he did it. Basically, what happened was his child, who was 13, was involved in a bully situation in school. That bully wound up bullying his 10-year-old daughter. So now that he has two of his children being bullied by the same person, he had approached this person. Again, she's 12 or 13 years old, and he told her, I don't want you coming near my house. And I hear that you are bullying my children again, he threatened. Basically he threatened her. So she went home, told her parents, and they filed a claim. They filed an assault claim with the police department. And unfortunately, that's on his record. So with that said, here is somebody who has a record. It showed up and got flagged in a background check, but when you dig a little deeper, he wasn't a predator. He wasn't an abuser or anything like that. So for us, we kind of had to put that human factor into it. You really have to dig into it a little more to find out what the real reason is. And I think that was important because we needed that coach. Of
Right.
course, if it was something major, we would have to say, sorry, we just can't accept you as a volunteer. But under the circumstances, we felt that, this guy is not a bad guy. He's a good guy, but got caught up in this situation trying to protect, his children.
Yeah. And I think, again, the key there is that flag is going to draw your attention so you can adjudicate and make the decision. Every organization makes their own decisions. They decide who they want to let on the field and who they don't want to let on the field. And so that gives you the opportunity to dig deeper, and you might like what you learn and you might not like what you learn, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a really good early warning sign to allow you to go figure out what to do, right? Because I guarantee there's nobody who's joining us today who's like, I have so many coaches, I don't even need them. They're like falling out of my pockets. I lend them out to friends. Like everybody's always looking for coaches because, it's just it's the lifeblood, especially in nonprofits and youth sports of coaching. I got drafted to coach this winter for basketball, and I'm a terrible basketball coach. But you know what? I had two kids on the team. They needed somebody, and I'm like, okay. So I watched a lot of videos, and I think I did a pretty good job. Well, we could talk about that on another webinar. Um,
I think another point is that look, we have especially marketing dealing with the size and scale and scope of our organization. Um, there's the potential to create different tiers and different strata and different areas of people who can have, access to certain things or not have access to certain things. And at League Apps, we have a very complicated and flexible system about who has access to what levels of information within the platform. And that's on purpose because, um, you know, you get to know people. And as I said before, employees and staff members are your greatest assets. We need them, but also potential liabilities. And so as you get to understand people and who they are and build trust and build relationships and build consistency with your staff, you can start to give them more and more access, more responsibility, more ways that are riskier to the organization as they become more and more involved, but also as you're building that trust. And so I think, understanding who your people are, providing them, with, enough access, but accountability, starts to make that more manageable. And as you learn over time, okay, here's what you have to do to prove to me to get to the next level or to get to the next level. And that's probably just a best practice to put into place before you just open the curtains to everything, every single person within the organization.
Yeah, I think that's excuse me, I think that's a great point, Mark. We are also really big on privacy, whether it's, our HIPAA or SOC 2 or whatever, but however you're managing data, you got to control it, right? You can't leave background checks sitting on your desk in a public place if that's, how you're managing them. And everybody shouldn't have access to every piece of information. So when you think about whatever vendors, whatever partners, whatever people are involved in that process, you want to make sure that they're also following following the right procedures and the right privacy, because it's really important. There are so many people who email around birth certificates on public Wi-Fi, or they, just shoot across their social security number, background check. Like you really don't want to do that anymore because it really does create exposure for you. And it's also not good for the end user as well because their data ends up being compromised. We did have a question, which I want to pop in here, which is, and I'll tell you right now, we don't have an answer, but how much insurance is the right amount of insurance? Well, there's no perfect answer for that. What I would say is that's a great question for your insurance broker. And if you have a good one, they will ask you the right questions about, well, how many kids do you have, and how big is the program, and well, you really should have $2 million here instead of $1 million, and here's why. But some of those will be dictated by the fields and the facilities you play at. So if you're in a municipality or you're in a private facility, a lot of times they're gonna say you got to have $1 million umbrella, you got to have $1 million incident for this, you got to have, such and such. And so those are the minimums. And so I would, as a starting point, I would talk to the broker. And then I would also look at where do your actual physical events take place and figure out, because you probably already signed something that says you're going to have a certain amount of insurance if you read the terms of service, as Mark mentioned, that people have made you sign at an ice rink or ball field or wherever. So, all right, why don't we jump over to, yeah. So again, we're going to put this up. Casey Stansbury is a leading lawyer who we talk a lot with and send folks to, but this is really his sort of sentiment, which is if you adopt policies and you're not consistent in the adherence to those policies, you are setting yourself up for a big loss. I said we were going to keep saying this, so I want to make sure we keep saying it because it's really important. Consistency really matters. And in some cases, like I don't want to say you shouldn't have policies, but in some cases you're better off not telling everybody you're going to do something than not doing it, right? In terms of a risk exposure. All right, so if we pop down, let's look at the next things to do and then we'll open us up to make sure we have time if we have other Q&A. But a couple next things to do: make a plan. I mean, I think it's always important to start with a plan, which is, what don't I know? What do I know that I need to do? And again, we safety risk management, it's a maturity curve. You don't have to do everything today. You can think about stepping into it and, okay, I'm doing a background check, but I'm not doing abuse prevention training. Maybe that's the next thing I should add. I don't have a policy or a procedure on this. We don't have an AED. Like, think about what the next 12 months can look like and step into that plan. Because, if you try and do everything all at once, it's just too hard. And get help, right? Get a safety committee. Margaret, you probably have a ton of people that are weighing in and helping you with different aspects of stuff. It's not just you running around and doing everything. I don't think it is. At least I hope it's not. So,
No.
get a committee. It takes a village, right? And so bring other folks in who can help assist you, take some of the load off you, right? You might be the thought leader, but get other stakeholders to help you with that. If you
Yeah,
have to,
I think
yeah,
that's
go
a
ahead,
good
Mark.
point. Yeah, I was going to say that uh, I co-chair our information security team here at League Apps, and as we mentioned earlier, as a software company, one of our biggest obligations is to safeguard the security and data of the information that we collect on behalf of organizations and their parents. But that committee consists of someone from legal, someone from finance, someone from product and engineering, someone from IT. And so, there's a number of different areas that you want to bring into your tent as you're starting to assess your business, because as the leader or organizer, you're focused on big picture issues often, and you may not see every dot and detail within the organization that someone who's involved in it on a day-to-day basis sees. So by all means, bring in your people, bring in different representatives, bring people from different departments as part of this committee that you had mentioned, so that you're getting a nice cross-section of the organization to really understand what happens on a daily basis, because you can't know everything within your organization at every time. And bringing people in just sort of makes that more fulsome.
Yeah. And you might even end up with multiple committees, right? You might have a sort of legal risk committee. Maybe some dad's a lawyer. Okay, they're not a litigator, but they're smart and able to understand legalese. They can help work on the insurance and some of the other stuff and help you with that. Whereas, maybe there's somebody else is an ER, a doctor. Maybe they're going to help on the safety committee, making sure, where AEDs should go. Like you can have different committees to solve different problems, right? And it just makes the load of work much lighter. Also gets you a better result, right? Nobody has all the best ideas by themselves, right? You always get the best result by listening to others and then playing with ideas and stuff. We talked about background checks. It's really important. If you're not doing them, you need to do them. Clear incident for reporting forms. Some of the worst advice, again, this is not legal advice because I'm not a lawyer, but like you always want to document what's happened, and you never want to, sometimes the lawyer response from the real estate guys, well, just don't say anything, don't do anything, because that might be right on a corporate setting. It's never right in the youth sports setting, is what we've learned. And again, so make sure you've got good legal advice and you're documenting stuff around incidents when they happen. So you have a track record and a history and you can say what's happened. We talked about reviewing insurance. We talked about safety trainings. It's a lot of trainings. There's a lot of free content out there, a lot of free trainings. You don't have to go pay for everything. Some of it you want to pay for, like CPR, but how to use an AED, you can learn how to do that for free. You can learn how to use an EpiPen. There's a lot of free trainings out there. Concussion training is free. Like there's a lot of good stuff out there, especially for nonprofits and tax exempt. Review your policies, agreements, waivers. It's worth spending a little bit of money if you need to have somebody, like a Mark, go through and update them from time to time. And then lastly, work with good insurance folks if you don't have them. And don't get overwhelmed. That's the marathon is run one step at a time, right? And so just get a plan. Everybody on this call, I'm sure, is happy to help if you have specific questions after this about what do I do about this. But get a plan and just keep working toward it, and things get easier.
Yeah, and remember, you're not being judged on perfection at all. I think we started off this webinar by saying being risk-free is impossible. You're judged based upon reasonableness, and that's the standard. What are the reasonable steps that I took in order to mitigate the risk to my constituents? And that's a building process. So it doesn't happen overnight. You don't, flip a magic switch and become, risk-proof. It's an evolving step, and your business is evolving as well. Hopefully you're not completely static and the same thing year over year. Your business grows. You might acquire new things. You might work on different facilities. You might work on different fields. Things may change. So you have to evolve with that. And it's sort of, lifelong learning experience, so to speak, in that you're constantly adding things, evaluating things, and making decisions, and then also assessing that risk. It doesn't have to be on a daily basis, or maybe it's a quarterly basis, maybe it's a semi-annual basis. But looking at things with fresh eyes as your business changes and evolves and your people change, will also give you more insight as to where to go next. And so you prioritize and reprioritize based upon the reality of your business.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I like to think of it, Mark, as I call it the sleep test. Like if you can't sleep at night because you're worried about something, that means you should be spending some time to fix that, whether it's on your business or on your risk. Hey, I'm really worried. What happens if a kid gets, a broken arm, or I'm really worried if there's a whatever. Well, that means you don't have a plan, you don't have a procedure, you don't have a policy, you don't have a solution. Get a committee and you can tackle that. So that concludes our prepared remarks. Margaret, is there anything else you want to add? I want to make sure we give you the final word here because you're really the authority.
No, I mean, listen, you had said, what keeps you up at night and stuff. And, for us, because we are a nonprofit and we're all volunteers, It's only what if. There are so many factors out there that we have no control over, but we can take control over certain things. And one of them is just making sure that we do our due diligence and we go through all of the process of keeping our kids as safe as possible. And that I think that would be the biggest my biggest concern as far as not being able to sleep is like, are we doing everything possible to make sure that these kids are safe? That's number one. I think number two would be one of the things I did not mention about the insurance, the COIs and stuff, which, we have started to crack down on it and making sure that all of our policies are correct, is that people need to understand the difference between a certificate holder and an additional insured. I think that's very important because just because you're a certificate holder does not mean that you are covered for any of the claims. That's why people should be aware and talk to their insurance company, the difference between an additional insured and a policy holder. I just want to mention that part.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The details really matter. It's really nuanced on some of that stuff. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. By the way, I'll just mention we have a bunch of insurance relationships. I'm happy to make introductions. If anybody doesn't like their broker, we'll send you to a couple two new folks to talk to who do a great job in youth sports. I'm sure Margaret has somebody she likes too if you're on the East Coast in Connecticut. So happy to help on any of that stuff. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Hopefully the spring season goes well. Today is opening day for baseball. So I'm in Boston. I'm going to say go Red Sox. I know Margaret is on Long Island, so she hates me already, but that's okay.
No.
That's okay. And Mark's in
Thank you.
LA, so he's a Dodgers fan. I think. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe Yankees. Never tell me
Guardian.
that. All right.
One thing I just want to say as well is that one of the purposes and reasons of having these seminars and webinars is to bring our League Apps sports community together. And so ask your colleagues, ask other people in the organization, ask folks that you meet, whether it's through meeting people through this or through our Next Up event that we have every year. Getting to know other people and what they're doing gives you a good idea of what's happening out there and what some of the best practices that other people are using as well. So take advantage of that in the League Ups community, and we're happy to bring you all together.
Yeah. So if you do have questions, we've got a few minutes left. You can throw them in. If not, we'll give a little bit of time back to you. I want to make sure I didn't forget this stuff because sometimes I forget to tie things up properly. And the other thing is we are doing free assessments. So if you have questions, folks at Anchored were happy to walk through and can't answer specific like legal questions or specific insurance questions, but if you have questions about compliance, about policies, about procedures, about how should I think about this or what should I do or what am I not doing, we are more than happy to set up a quick 15-20 minute assessment with you. We did this with Margaret when we first got on board and just sort of walked through what's the state of today and what do you wish the state was tomorrow. And if we can help, awesome. And if not, we'll point you in the right direction about how to get there. That's sort of what the community is all about.
Great. And a reminder, we'll send you this deck so that you'll have a link to be able to request a free compliance assessment from Anchored. And then I also want to quickly plug, hot off the presses, we have dates for our Next Up conference. If you enjoy content like this, if you want to be part of the conversation, if you want to lead the conversation, when you get this deck, click Get Next Up info, and we would love to hear from you. We would love for you to nominate speakers. This is a fantastic convention that we do all sports, and we talk about topics such as compliance in addition to all sorts of other topics, player development, retention, et cetera, et cetera. We want you to grow and scale your businesses. So thank you so much. We hope to see you there. Please click the button. And if you have any other questions right now, we have just a couple minutes to answer. Did you guys have any pop up?
I'll take a look. Also, Margaret and I will be there. We will autograph a printout of this webinar for you if you want. Like, there's no charge for that. That's
That's probably in that audience somewhere, actually, if you zoom in. So yes,
oh,
please
God.
do join us.
Look for the bald head. That's me. Okay. All right. Let's see if there's any Q&A. I know we had a couple come through earlier. Give it 1 second. All right. I think we're all set. Thank you, everybody, for participating, and stay safe. We'll see you out there.